Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. So I thought it would be really fun to do a tag today. I have not done a tag in quite a long time, but it just sounded fun and it's always fun to answer questions, so I figured why not? I think I've done this tag once before, but it was quite a long time ago, so my answers have probably changed. So let's get into the TBR tag. The first question is, how do you keep track of your TBR pile? So I keep track of my TBR in a couple of different ways. In terms of just general things I want to read, I have a TBR folder on my Goodreads, and that is just kind of where I throw any book that I'm interested in. Even if I'm mildly interested in it, it kind of gives me a log of things to kind of look back on. If I'm either book shopping or I'm just trying to find something to read, I can kind of go through that. That list is not necessarily my to be read in the same way that like my physical TBR is. Those are just ideas of things I might be interested in reading. And then of course there's my physical TBR. So those are all of the unread books on my shelves. I don't have my TBR and read books separated on my shelves, but as I go through I can see which things I haven't read, obviously. So all of those are part of my actual TBR. And then the last way I keep track of my TBR is in my traveler's notebook, where I actually just write down the TBR for a particular month. So if I have a specific TBR for a month or a year, I will write those down separately as well. The second question is your TBR mostly print or ebook? So I've actually never really read an ebook, maybe for school, but not like for pleasure reading. So all of my books are either physical or audiobooks, which are ebooks, I suppose, but I get a lot of things from Libby and from my library. So in that way I have some ebooks, but everything that I'm actually reading is going to be a physical book. I guess I just don't really enjoy reading on screens. I like the actual feel of a book in my hands, and I get enough screen time as it is, so it's nice to have a physical book to look at, and I've just never been drawn to like a Kindle or anything like that. So the third question is, how do you determine which book from your TBR to read next? I would categorize myself as a mood reader, so it really just depends on what I'm feeling. I really like to shop my bookshelves, if you will, so just go to the bookshelves and look and find something that sounds interesting that I haven't read yet. So I do kind of just work with my moods a little bit, but I do like to have a fiction and a nonfiction kind of going at the same time, as well as an audiobook. So that could look like an audiobook that's fiction and then a nonfiction book, or vice versa. Or I could potentially have 3 books going, a nonfiction, a fiction that I'm physically reading, and then a fiction or nonfiction audiobook. So essentially I pick like 2 to 3 different things at a time. The next question is a book that's been on your TBR list the longest. So this is kind of surprising, but the oldest book on my TBR on Goodreads is How a Poem Moves, a field guide for readers of poetry by Adam Soul. So this is an essay collection that walks readers through an array of contemporary poems. That's kind of random. I think I updated this while I was in school. I was probably taking a poetry module in college. So that's the first book on my Goodreads TBR. Now, like I said, I'm not necessarily going through and reading all these books. I have 530 books on my Goodreads TBR pile currently, and that's just unrealistic. In terms of the oldest physical book I have, I can't be sure, but it may be The Complete Stories of Flannery O'Connor. I know that I found that one at a used bookstore when I was in college, and it really was only in college that I started actually buying books regularly. So I think everything that I had on my shelves prior to college I had already read. That's my best guess. I don't actually know. So the next question is a book that you recently added to your TBR. In terms of my Goodreads TBR, the last book that I put on there is Rental House by Wei Wang. And then in terms of a physical TBR-ish, I got The Husbands by Holly Gramazio from the library. This is the most recent book that I picked up from the library, so I suppose that's my most recent physical TBR book. Next question is a book on your TBR strictly because of its beautiful cover. So at this point in my reading life, I don't really cover buy books anymore. I try to find books that I'm genuinely really excited about in order to actually purchase them. But I will say that the closest thing I have for this prompt is Monster, She Wrote, The Women Who Pioneered Horror and Speculative Fiction. So I bought this book because I really liked the cover. The end papers are beautiful. I just loved the vibe of this book, and I think The subject matter is interesting to me, so I don't know that it was an entirely cover motivated purchase, but I don't know that I'm ever really going to read this cover to cover. It's more of a reference type of book. So I would say that this is more of a cover purchase than it was for the actual, cover to cover reading experience. The next question is a book on your TBR that you never plan on reading. So like I said, on my Goodreads TBR, there are tons of books that I probably will never actually read, but I wanted to point out a book that I might just unhaul at this point, and that is Like Me by Haley Phelan. Now, no shade if you really liked this book. It sounded really interesting at the time, but I'm at this stage where I'm not reading the exact same type of literature that I did before I kind of took a break from the Bookstagram and BookTube space. And I'm kind of trying to sort out what it is that I do want to read. And this type of book just doesn't feel overly inspiring to me. I still like to read weird women books, but I think that this one just doesn't feel particularly exciting to me anymore. And if I'm completely real with myself, I should probably just unhaul this. All right, so the next question is a book on your TBR that's not out yet. I talked about a few books that aren't out yet that I was excited about in my 25 books to read in 2025 video, but there is another book that I am excited for, and it is Death Takes Me by Cristina Rivera Garza. So the little blurb says, Death Takes Me is a thrilling masterpiece of literary fiction that flips the traditional crime narrative on its head in a world where death is rampant and violence is gendered. Written in sentences as sharp as the cuts on the bodies of the victims, Death Takes Me unfolds the charged logic of a dream, moving from the professor's classroom into the slippery worlds of Latin American poetry and art, as it explores with masterful imagination the unstable terrains of desire and sexuality. So it's coming out on February 25th, and I've seen this one everywhere on anticipated reads list for this year, so that's definitely one that I'm excited about. The next one is a book on your TBR that basically everyone's read but you. So I kind of have two answers to this question. A more recent one that people have read and I have not read yet is All Fours by Miranda July. This was a very anticipated read for a lot of people, and I've seen really great reviews of it and just so many reviews of it. So I think a lot of people have already read this, but it is on my upcoming TBR. And the other one is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I know that so many people have read this book and I am so late to the party. It sounds like it's going to be incredible. It hasn't been a priority book for me. It's just kind of taken a backseat and I have not felt excited to get around to it, but I still do want to read it. The next question is a book on your TBR that everyone recommends to you. So I don't know about everyone, but several people have told me to actually read The Handmaid's Tale. And this is one of the more shameful things for me that I have not actually read this, because I have watched the show and I've also read the Testaments, which is the follow-up to this book, and I've never actually sat down and read this book. But everybody in my life who knows that I've watched the show and love the show is like, are you serious? You haven't read The Handmaid's Tale. So this is one that I probably need to get to. The next question is a book on your TBR that you're dying to read. I think that would have to be Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolan. I actually don't have a physical copy of this, but I have the audiobook ready to go on Libby, so it is a very anticipated read for me, and I think I'm probably going to start that one possibly next. I've just heard a lot of good things about this book, and I feel like I'm late to the party, so I'm excited to read that one soon. The final question is how many books are on your TBR pile? So lots on my Goodreads TBR pile, but in terms of my physical TBR, I have around 100 books that I have not read on my physical TBR. So quite a few. So that's the TBR tag. I had so much fun filming this for you and answering these questions. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.